Speak to Win. Chapter 6. Mastering Small Group Presentations and Negotiations. The greatest good you can do for another is not just to share your own riches, but to reveal to him his own. Benjamin Disraeli. Most of the opportunities for you to win points speaking will take place in small business meetings. As I discussed in Chapter 5, it is important to know how to lead and participate in meetings effectively. But in these meetings, you will often be called upon to make a presentation of your point of view, product, or policy in an attempt to persuade others to agree with you and to support your recommended course of action. So, if business meetings are an essential tool for the executive, the presentations made in those meetings may be even more important. Many people have changed the entire direction of their careers and their companies by making an effective presentation to a small group of people with decision-making power. You can do the same. Small group presentations can make or break your career. Each time you give a presentation to a small group, imagine that your future and your career hang in the balance. Imagine that this meeting is being videotaped to be shown to thousands of people. Imagine that there is a hidden camera on you while you're making your presentations, and it is showing your presentation to people all over the country. In other words, take the presentation seriously. The more seriously you take your presentation in advance, the more seriously the participants will respond to you. As in all meetings of any size, preparation is the key to success. It will account for fully 90% of the results that you get or fail to get. As a top lawyer once said to me, I don't believe that there is any such word as over-prepare. Start with the end in mind. Determine your goals for the presentation. Idealize and ask yourself, if this meeting were perfect, what would be the outcome? Think on paper. Write down the very best things that could possibly happen if your presentation were perfectly effective and you achieved every goal you had in mind. The greater clarity you have with regard to the perfect outcome, the easier it will be to prepare your presentation, and the more likely it is that you will achieve those goals at the end. Remember that everything is a negotiation. When you are giving a small group presentation in an attempt to persuade others to support you, you are engaging in a form of negotiation. Each person will come into the room with his own ideas and desires. Your aim is to bring the group around to your personal point of view and convince them to support your recommendations. This means that you will have to gradually change their minds, and in some cases, change their minds completely. Think like a lawyer. Use the lawyer's method to prepare for a presentation. Lawyers learn to prepare the opponent's case before they prepare their own. To do this, write down everything that you think the other participants in the meeting will want or think that is in opposition to what you want to accomplish. If you can be specific, attach the particular objections and resistance to the particular people to whom you will be speaking. Know the difference between desire and fear. With one group of executives at a large company with whom I negotiate once or twice a year, I begin by writing out the things I know about their concerns and reasons for skepticism or hesitancy. Most of all, I know that they are resistant to change. This is quite common when you are giving a presentation. People have a tendency to get into a comfort zone and then to resist any attempts or suggestions to move them out of this comfort zone. The two primary motivations for buying, or for almost any other decision to change, are fear and desire. People are afraid of losing time, money, prestige, advantage, or something else. People desire more time, money, market share, opportunity, and so on. Psychologists tell us that the motivating power of fear is 2.5 times the motivating power of desire. This means that emphasizing what the participants can lose from not accepting your ideas is 2.5 times more persuasive than emphasizing what they can gain. In many cases, however, the primary benefit you have to offer is that the participants will gain from your ideas. The main reason that anyone does anything revolves around the word improvement. That is, people take action because they believe that they will be better off as a result of acting than they would be if they did not act at all. So even when you're appealing to fear, the fears of rejection, criticism, loss, embarrassment, disapproval, ridicule, and so on, you are suggesting that the participant's situation will improve relative to these fears if she takes your advice. Understand the meeting participants. When making a presentation to a group of people, you're often dealing with several distinctly different personalities. This means that each person will have different fears and desires in different degrees of intensity. The more knowledgeable you are about what people want to accomplish and what they're afraid of experiencing, the easier it will be for you to tailor your remarks and address their concerns. I know that the group of executives at the company I mentioned earlier has a strong resistance to change, but they also have a strong desire to increase their sales and profits. Therefore, I always focus on making a strong case for increased sales and profitability, and then, to allay their fears of loss, I suggest a low-cost, no-cost test of my idea to see if it is capable of delivering the proper revenues and profits that I'm suggesting. Over the years, I have found that people are usually quite open to a limited test with limited risk on a new idea. On the other hand, they're usually extremely tense about risking a large amount of money to try out an untested idea. Understand common fears. Most adults are afraid of being manipulated or taken advantage of. They're afraid of being hustled, talked into doing something that is contrary to their short-term or long-term interests, being sold a product, service, or idea that they don't need, can't use, and can't afford, or of ending up worse off after they have accepted a recommendation than they were before. People have these fears because, starting in childhood, they have been talked into doing or not doing things that have not turned out well and have been taken advantage of by a variety of people. As a result, they have an almost Pavlovian response to anyone who's attempting to persuade them to do anything. They're naturally skeptical and suspicious. Each time a person is taken advantage of and feels that he has come out on the short end of the stick, he says to himself consciously and subconsciously, "This won't happen to me again." You should consider this when making a small group presentation. Lower their resistance. Whenever you make a presentation for a new idea, product, or service, these fears are triggered in the minds and hearts of your listeners, making them naturally resistant and skeptical. Your job, while speaking, is to do everything possible to lower their resistance and remove this skepticism. Use the Socratic method of presentation. When you want to introduce a new subject to another individual or group, always begin with the facts of the matter that everyone agrees with and around which there is no controversy. Then, leverage these facts into areas that may be new and with which people may disagree. Negotiating big deals. When I have negotiated large contracts with group of people, often with myself on one side of the table and 6 to 10 other officials or executives on the other side of the table, I have always followed a strategy that has proved successful time after time. We start off with a contract or a development agreement of 30, 40, or even 50 pages. I will have carefully reviewed every clause in the agreement ahead of time and will be quite clear about which clauses are most important to me and which elements of the contract are most important to the other parties. We then go through the agreement, paragraph by paragraph, and line by line, discussing and agreeing or disagreeing with each point as we move along. 80% of the various clauses and subclauses in contracts are boilerplate and non-controversial. We therefore go through all of these clauses from the first to the last page and agree on all of the things that we agree on. When we come to a part of the agreement where we disagree, I conduct a short discussion around this point to get the other side's thoughts and feelings, and then I say, why don't we put this aside for now and come back to it later? We then go on to the next point and continue to work step by step through the agreement, putting aside each controversial point as we go along so as not to interrupt the flow. Once we have reviewed the entire agreement and agreed upon most of the clauses, we go back through the more controversial points. We discuss each point as thoroughly as possible. If one is a particularly emotional sticking point, I once again suggest that we put it aside. The second time, through the agreement, we will resolve about 80% of the 20% of unresolved issues, leaving us with about 4% of the total agreement left to be discussed and agreed upon. By this time, we have agreement on as much as 96% of the clauses and subclauses. Everyone is positive and feeling a sense of forward progress. We can now go back through and discuss in depth with less emotion and more openness the unresolved parts of the contract. The Law of Four. There is a law of four in negotiating. This law says that there are only four main issues that need to be discussed and resolved in the course of any negotiation. It also says that the opposing parties must have a different order of value and priority on these four issues for an agreement to take place. For example, if one party is concerned about the price, and other party is concerned about the quality or the speed of delivery, then a negotiating can proceed to a satisfactory conclusion where a price is agreed upon in return for dependable, consistent delivery and quality. It is only when both parties are adamant about the same issue, like the price, that a stalemate can occur. Your job, prior to giving a group presentation, is to identify the four major issues that you will eventually come to in the course of your discussion, and then determine how you can offset, neutralize, or compensate for their major concerns so that you can be satisfied on your major concerns. Presentation versus negotiation. The principles remain the same. When you make a presentation to a small group, the process may not be as lengthy or as dramatic as a 2 or 3 day negotiating session with huge amounts of money and egos at stake. But the principles remain the same. You must think through the concerns of the participants in the meeting and the 4 main issues on which you will have to get agreement if you want to proceed. You then design your entire presentation so that you achieve that goal at the end of the discussion. Think on paper. When making a business presentation, you should think on paper. Write down all the objections that an intelligent person could give you for not proceeding with your idea or accepting your recommendations. Then, write out 1 or more logical answers to each of those objections. When the question, concern, or objection comes up, you should treat it with great respect and appear to think carefully about how you might best address that concern. Express acceptance, agreement, and appreciation. Then, present your already carefully considered answer to the objection as though it just occurred to you in the last few seconds. Always appear reasonable and agreeable. Whatever the concern, resistance, or objection might be to your idea, always treat it with friendliness, courtesy, and grace. Never throw gasoline on the fire. The more low-key and friendly you are when you deal with the concerns or antagonisms of people in your meeting, the more open they will be to considering your ideas. Remember the lyrics, "A spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down." When you give a small group presentation, remember that it is not a dramatic monologue. It is a conversation. Present a point, wrap it up, and summarize it, and then invite questions or comments from the participants. Get them involved. The more you can involve the participants in the discussion as you go along, the better sense you will have for how they are thinking and feeling, and the more likely it is that they will agree with you at the end of your presentation. There is a special feature of group dynamics that you need to include in your presentations. It is this: each member of the group feels that you're personally treating him or her the same way that you're treating any other member of the group. Group solidarity. When you treat any member of the group with friendliness and respect, every member of the group feels as if she too is being treated with friendliness and respect. Each member of the group feels that he is a part of a whole. On the other hand, if you treat any member of the group with irritation or impatience, the other members of the group feel that you're treating them the same way. Be careful. Determine the pecking order. Even though you must treat everyone equally, when you make small group presentations, you must be very alert to the pecking order of the members of the group. In many groups, one of the members is more important than the others. His or her opinion, expressed verbally or non-verbally, carries more weight than that of anyone else. From the top person on down, there is a descending order of priority. Someone is first in importance. Someone is second. Someone is third in importance. Some people attending the meeting will have little or no clout at all. For you to make an effective presentation, you must be clear who carries the most weight and then organize your presentation so that you continually address the most powerful person in the group. In some cases, the top person will say very little. In other cases, the top person will say a lot. Different strokes. When I was in the Arabian Gulf recently, I read up on the negotiating techniques and strategies of people in the Arab world. What I learned was that in any meeting, the person who sits quietly and says the least is the most powerful person in the room. The person who speaks the most and asks the most questions is the messenger boy and is often the least powerful or consequential in the negotiation. If I had not read that, the most talkative person might have unduly impressed me. In Western negotiating, the top person may say a lot or say a little. In any case, it is important that you know who this person is and that you defer to this person on a regular basis. You direct your comments to this person and then sweep the room, making eye contact with the other important people, one at a time. You then come back to the top person and make sure that he or she is following you and understands the points that you're making. Talking is a two-way street. There is a direct relationship between the amount of involvement in a conversation and the amount of commitment to the agreements made in the conversation. When you're talking with staff members, for example, the more you invite them to ask questions, comment, and agree or disagree, the more they will buy in to whatever decisions people make. If people are not commenting or asking questions, they're not committing. They're merely listening. By not saying anything, they're avoiding participating in whatever decision is made and evading any responsibility for carrying out the decisions or the actions. Alfred Sloan, one of the founders of General Motors, would often convene a group of executives to discuss a new company product or policy. At the end of the meeting, he would ask, "Are there any questions or comments on these ideas?" If no one said anything, or if everyone agreed with the ideas presented, Sloan would say, "Obviously, the people in this room do not understand the importance of what we're discussing. If everyone is in agreement, then we must convene this meeting and reconvene at a later time. At that time, I expect comments and disagreements from the people around this table." What Sloan found, and what many executives and presenters find, is that if no one is saying anything, or if everyone is in agreement, no one has given the idea much thought. This means that they will only start thinking about the ramifications of the discussion later, and this later thinking can sabotage the entire effort. Take a power position. When making a presentation to a small group, organize the room so that you have your back to a wall and the entrance is opposite you. With this setup, people can come and go without breaking up the flow of the meeting, and you can see each of them. The best setup for a small group presentation is a U-shape, in which you stand and present at the open end of the U. All of the participants should sit around the outside of the U-shape, so that almost everyone can see almost everyone else, eye to eye, across the tables. This setup is totally different from one in which everyone sits facing you but next to, in front of, or behind the other participants. There's little or no communication or opportunity to share ideas, even by smiling, raising eyebrows, shrugging shoulders, and so on. Always, try to set up the room so that everyone can see everyone else and see you as well. When I conduct a strategic planning session, I put all the executives on the outside of a U-shaped table. When I bring up a point or a question, I go around the table, person by person, and invite him to answer or comment. This method has been extraordinarily successful for me over the years. It gives every single person a chance to voice her ideas or concerns, and gives every other person a chance to watch and listen to the speaker express his or her thoughts. By the time we go around the table, we have had a rich, in-depth discussion that has covered a large number of points. Determine the next action. Remember, the purpose of a presentation, large or small, is to agree on an action of some kind. As the conversation evolves, you should be continually asking, what action do we take at this point? What action should we take on this issue? What is our next action if we are in agreement to this? When you're making a group presentation and a series of different actions is required, it's essential to get agreement from the group about exactly who is going to be responsible for the action and when it will be completed. Many excellent presentations that end with agreement on a course of action result in nothing happening. This is always because no one was assigned specific responsibilities with a deadline for carrying out the actions that were agreed upon. Even if you have to repeat yourself or be a little demanding or assertive, it's essential that you get agreement on who is going to do what and by when, if you are running the presentation. It is the ultimate goal of the presentation and the meeting. Your ability to follow up and ensure that these actions are taken is what gives the planning and the presentation value. Make it visual as well as auditory. In any group of people, about 70% of the participants will be visual in orientation. The other 30% will be auditory. What this means is that 70% of the audience, the visuals, will need to see the facts, points, and illustrations in order to understand and process what you're saying. The other 30%, the auditories, will be able to understand and process the information by simply hearing it from you. As a result, 70% of your audience will probably only understand you if you illustrate what you're saying. Write down your presentation agenda so these people can follow along. You could use PowerPoint for your key points, bringing them up on the screen one at a time as you make the points in your presentation. You can use a whiteboard or a flip chart to write down key points or to illustrate the ramifications and results of your presentation. People who are visual in orientation relax and take comfort when they can see your presentation unfolding. Auditories, on the other hand, are quite content with written or graphic material, but they very much like to hear what you have to say and will often ask questions about your specific meaning for a particular word or phrase. Be prepared. Show, tell, and ask questions. When I began to give seminar presentations, I started off using flip charts, then moved to a whiteboard, and now I use an overhead projector or a device called an Elmo. This allows me to write down my key points while they're projected on a screen behind or next to me. As I go through my presentation, I draw graphs, pictures, stick figures, and other illustrations to offer a visual representation of the key points I'm making. When I emphasize a particular word or concept, I write it down clearly so that people can see it. As a result, people take an enormous amount of notes. As soon as you write something down, people immediately sense that it is important and they write it down as well. This keeps them actively engaged in your presentation throughout. If you only speak with no written materials or illustrations, even the most brilliant mind will forget 80% to 90% of what you say before the end of your talk. When you speak and write, you capture both the auditories and the visuals and make your presentation an interesting and enjoyable experience for everyone in the room. Understandings prevent misunderstandings. When you receive a question or comment from a participant in your audience, unless it is perfectly clear what the person is asking or what he means, you should do one of two things. First of all, you should rephrase the comment or question so that it is clear in your own mind before you respond to it. You can then say, "Is this the question you were asking?" A second way to be sure that you are responding to the correct comment is to ask the participant to rephrase his question in such a way that you understand it better. Use the question, "How do you mean exactly?" whenever there is any lack of clarity or ambiguity on your part. The dumbest thing you can do is to set off to answer the wrong question or respond to a comment that you misunderstood in the first place. Summary. Resolve today to prepare thoroughly and be at your best in every group presentation. Remember that people who can influence your career are watching and evaluating your performance. Each time you open your mouth in a group to persuade, contribute, or disagree, you are moving yourself forward or backward. And everything counts.